Is there a problem? He asked evenly. Her fingers didn't stop moving. You'll need to step aside, sir. There's an issue with your ticket. The words landed flat, mechanical, rehearsed. Elias Thorne glanced at the screen, then back at the gate agent. He'd checked in online. Cleared security. First class. Confirmed seat. There's no issue, he replied. Her eyes didn't lift. Sir, please. Step aside. No explanation. No second glance. Just that clipped tone used to move problems out of the way. He stepped aside. Not out of agreement, but calculation. Gate B14 pulsed with movement. The next name was called. Boarding continued. Travelers filed past, offering brief, curious looks. One man slowed down, then kept walking. Elias remained still, shoulders straight, hands steady. Internally, something tightened. Not shock. Recognition. He'd lived this script before. Different cities, different uniforms, same lines. I'm on this flight, he said again. Controlled. The agent's nameplate read Elara. She didn't respond, just turned slightly to whisper to a colleague. A side glance. A smirk. More typing. Elias shifted his stance, not out of discomfort, but clarity. This wasn't about paperwork. This was something else. A second gate agent walked over. Elias noted her hesitation, uncertain, not in charge. Elara stayed seated, fingers now resting on the desk as if she had already decided what the outcome would be. Across the gate area, a woman in a navy jacket paused mid-scroll on her phone. A man in business casual leaned slightly in their seat. The energy had shifted. Not loudly. Just enough to be noticed. Elara finally looked up. Your ticket's been flagged. You'll need to wait until we verify eligibility. He didn't move. I suggest you contact customer service, she added. I don't need customer service, Elias replied, his voice low. I need your name and your employee ID. Her confidence cracked, just slightly. I don't see how that's relevant, she said. It will be, he said, reaching slowly into his coat. Not for his passport. Not for another document. But for the card that changed everything. A metallic edge caught the light as he pulled it free. My name, he said, is Elias Thorne, Chief Operating Officer, Global Air Holdings. Elara's mouth parted. Her eyes flicked to the card, then back to his face. He reached into his coat. I'm placing a call now, he said. You may want to remain present. This conversation isn't just procedural anymore. Have you ever been rejected without any reason? Tell us in the comments section and like this video if it resonates with you. Before he reached into his coat, before her confidence collapsed, Elias waited. He had waited long enough. What began as a routine interaction had morphed into something else. Slow, precise, and exhausting. It started with a glance. Elara took his passport and boarding pass without greeting, eyes darting from screen to ID to face. Then hesitating. I'll need to verify something, she muttered. No context. No explanation. She asked for his ID again, though it was already in her hand. She tilted her screen slightly, away from his view, then typed without urgency. Elias stood quietly, every movement deliberate. He'd learned over time not to flinch under this kind of gaze. The gaze that didn't see a traveler, just a question. A moment passed. She sighed, low and performative. This ticket's been flagged, she said. I'm not sure why. You may need to rebook through customer service. He kept his voice steady. I'm confirmed on this flight. She blinked slowly. You'll have to step aside while we check. The space between them stretched wider than the counter. Her words were neutral, but her eyes had already closed the door. A quiet assertion. You don't belong here until I say so. She called another agent, not for help, but for reinforcement. Whispered something. The other agent didn't approach, just watched. He wasn't being treated like a passenger. He was being managed. A young couple at the next gate looked over. A man in business class turned around briefly, then faced forward again. The air thickened, not from noise, but from recognition. Elias had felt this before. A random security search. A front desk unable to find a reservation. A luxury store offering lower shelves first. These weren't new. They were the cost of moving through spaces not built with you in mind. Elias remembered his father's voice. Stay composed. Let their discomfort reveal itself before you reveal anything. So he had waited. Until Ilara turned dismissive. Until the tone changed from professional to personal. Until she made him feel like he was being granted permission, not receiving service. That was the moment. Not when she delayed him. But when she diminished him. That's when Elias reached into his coat, not for argument, not for apology. But for proof. A silver-edged card. A single sentence. A speakerphone call that would cut through years of careful avoidance and finally name what so many had learned to endure in silence. Ilara picked up the desk phone without looking at him. Supervisor to gate B14 please, she said, not a request, but a summons. Her voice wasn't loud. But it carried, just enough to land in the ears of those nearby. Passengers shifted in their seats. One woman leaned forward. A teenager raised her phone, pretending to scroll but already recording. The moment began to unspool. Sir, Ilara said, eyes flicking past him toward the growing line. Please wait off to the side until further notice. Further notice? As if he'd triggered something dangerous. As if his very presence required containment. Elias said nothing. He stepped slightly aside, not far, just enough to mark the line between accepted and excluded. He stayed within earshot, arms folded, face unreadable. The supervisor arrived 2 minutes later. A middle-aged man in a navy blazer, his name badge crooked, his gait brisk but wary. He didn't greet Elias. He didn't ask for an explanation. He walked straight to Ilara and leaned in. Their conversation was hushed but deliberate. Elias watched their eyes flick toward him, then back to the screen. More typing. More nods. Another pause. The supervisor folded his arms, said something short, then glanced in Elias's direction with a half-apologetic shrug. Ilara turned back toward him. Unfortunately, the system won't allow us to clear your boarding at this time. It's a flagged credential. We have to follow procedure. Procedure. That word again. Flagged by what? Elias asked. It's an internal matter, she replied, her tone carefully flat. We can't override it at the gate. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She didn't explain. Instead, she made sure every word she said could be defended later, if it came to that. A man near the waiting area stood up, phone angled discreetly. A flight attendant walking by slowed her steps. The situation had drawn breath. It had a presence now. Quiet but watching. Elias remained still. But inside, something pushed against his ribs. He felt the weight of every gaze, every whisper. The pressure wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to the room. He wasn't a CEO right now. He wasn't a partner in global infrastructure. He wasn't even a passenger. In their eyes, he was something else. A disturbance. A delay. A reason to check the news tomorrow. He took a slow breath through his nose. His coat hung over his arm, his boarding pass still pressed flat between his fingers. He looked at it once, then at Ilara, then at the line of passengers inching forward without him. This wasn't confusion. It was choreography. A familiar dance of plausible deniability dressed up in corporate decorum. He considered walking. Not out of defeat, but exhaustion. The kind only felt by those who've had to decide whether reclaiming your dignity is worth another confrontation. But something held him there. Maybe it was the teenager still filming. Maybe it was the woman pretending not to listen. Maybe it was the part of him that remembered his mother being asked to show a second ID at a check-in counter, while the couple before her wasn't even asked for one. His silence deepened. The moment slowed. The noise of the concourse dulled behind the quiet fire in his chest. Phone stayed up. Eyes stayed on. Stillness again. But this time, it didn't belong to shame. It belonged to control. Elias stepped forward. His voice was even. Not raised. Not rushed. I'd like your full name, he said, locking eyes with Ilara. And your employee ID. She blinked, once. Why? You'll need to provide it. Now. The line behind him paused. The nearby supervisor stiffened. Ilara crossed her arms, feigning control. Is there an issue with how I'm doing my job? No, Elias replied, sliding a card from his coat pocket, letting its metal edge catch the light. There's an issue with how you've forgotten who you're doing it for. He held the card between two fingers, just long enough for her to read the title. Elias Thorne, Chief Operating Officer, Global Air Holdings. The silence was immediate. I've been on your board's performance review calls, he continued, voice low but unflinching. I've led restructuring efforts across 3 of your regional hubs. And now, I'm being denied boarding at a gate my division oversees. He didn't need to explain further. The badge said everything. Ilara's arms dropped. Her mouth parted but no response came. Her posture changed, not slowly, but all at once. The power she'd wielded moments ago, absolute, unquestioned, had evaporated. Elias raised his phone. A name already dialed. One ring. Marcus, he said calmly into the speaker. I'm at Oakhaven, Gate B14. Your gate agent just denied me boarding on fabricated grounds. I want her removed. Immediately. The voice on the other end responded, fast and serious. We'll handle it. Stay where you are. Elias nodded once. You'll want to pull camera footage. And I expect a statement confirming this removal by the end of the day. He ended the call. For a second, no one moved. Then the supervisor spoke, quiet, clipped. I'll need a moment, sir. He turned, gestured to another employee, and stepped away from the counter. Ilara stood still. Not defiant, vacant. The flush in her cheeks had drained. Her fingers twitched at her side, reaching for nothing. She looked toward the boarding door, then back to her station, as if unsure what to do with either. Security arrived not for Elias, but for protocol. They walked past him, addressed no words to him. Their focus was now elsewhere. Passengers stared, not with judgment, but recognition. They understood, now, who had authority here. Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't lecture. He simply stood there, precise, composed, undeniable. This time, no one asked him to wait. The terminal's rhythm stilled. Conversations hushed. Screens flashed new departure times, but the crowd at Gate B14 wasn't moving. An airline manager arrived, tie slightly off-center, earpiece already in. He took one look at Elias, then pivoted to the gate agents. His steps were quick, his voice low. Ilara didn't speak. She stood rooted behind the desk, her hands now folded tightly, face drained of its earlier certainty. The manager turned to her, said something brief. She nodded once. Barely. 2 security officers stepped forward, one flanking each side. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just present. She was asked to gather her belongings. No shouting. No resistance. Only the soft rustle of her name badge being removed and the slow walk down the corridor, flanked by silence. Passengers followed her exit with their eyes, some still recording. One older woman lowered her phone and exhaled through her nose, soft, but sharp. A man near the business lounge gave a slow shake of his head. Even the children nearby stopped fidgeting. The shift was felt, not spoken. Above the gate, the boarding announcement resumed as if on cue. A few minutes later, a breaking banner appeared on airport television screens. Global Air Holdings issues statement following incident at Oakhaven Airport. We have zero tolerance for discrimination in any form. The employee involved has been released from her duties. We remain committed to enforcing federal protections and upholding the rights of every traveler. No excuses. No delays. Just acknowledgement. The crowd began to move again. Gate agents resumed scanning tickets. Travelers rolled their bags toward the jet bridge. But for those who had witnessed it, something lingered. The man they almost watched get turned away now stood exactly where he belonged, untouched, unbothered, unshaken. He didn't glance toward Ilara's path. He didn't speak as she disappeared from sight. Because for Elias, this wasn't about retaliation. It was about return. To dignity. To principle. To order. And for once, the system had corrected itself, because someone made sure it had no choice. The cabin was still. Elias settled into seat 2A, coat folded neatly beside him. No one greeted him with fanfare. No one made an announcement. But the flight crew's eyes held something different now, recognition, Perhaps. Or respect that required no explanation. He placed his phone face down on the armrest. Outside the window, the wing caught the morning light. The tarmac blurred in motion. Engines stirred beneath him, steady and unbothered. But inside, he wasn't celebrating. He was remembering. There were no reporters here. No applause. Just quiet. The kind that offers room to think. He thought of the small things that built up over time. The hotel clerk who double-checked his reservation, the investor who assumed he was someone's assistant, the driver who asked if he was in the right neighborhood. Not one of those moments ever made headlines. They just gathered, quietly, into a weight he learned to carry. And now, even after everything, that weight hadn't disappeared. It had only shifted. He leaned his head back. Thought of Claudette Cole, 15 years old, refusing to give up her seat before the world was ready to hear her name. Thought of Philip Randolph, organizing labor rights when dignity had to be defended with every breath. They hadn't needed cameras to justify their resistance. They just needed resolve. Elias had power today. Enough to speak and be heard. Enough to act and be taken seriously. But his mind stayed on those who didn't. The passengers who wouldn't have known who to call. The workers told to stay quiet. The parents trying to shield their children from shame that had no justification. He hadn't stood up for himself alone. He had done it because too many others had been made to shrink. As the wheels left the runway, the terminal fell away behind him. But the meaning stayed. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reminder. That no matter how polished your credentials, no matter how composed your presence, the question of belonging is still too often placed at someone else's discretion. And that has to change. Not just through policy. Through culture. Through courage. Through the choice to speak when silence would be easier. The plane leveled. A quiet chime sounded. Elias looked ahead, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. Because strength isn't always in the correction. Sometimes, it's in the refusal to let dismissal become routine. Voiceover begins. This wasn't just about one gate. Not just about one agent. It was about every room where presence becomes a question. Every moment where confidence is treated like audacity. Every glance that tries to shrink someone who's earned their space. Elias's story struck a chord not because it was rare, but because it was familiar. The mistake Alara made wasn't just denying him boarding. It was assuming his role could be dismissed just like his presence. She mistook compliance for power and was reminded that silence is not the same as submission. But this story isn't truly about Alara. It's about the system that allowed her comfort in acting that way. A system that, without interruption, repeats itself across industries, neighborhoods, and generations. Removing one person doesn't repair that. Accountability is a start. Reform is the requirement. That means policies with teeth. Leadership that listens. Environments built on respect, not assumptions. It means shifting how institutions respond, not when they're caught, but before anyone has to record. Elias had the means to speak and to be heard. But many don't. And every time a moment like this is ignored, it quietly grants permission for the next. We tell these stories not for shock, but for clarity. Not for entertainment, but for change. A young black traveler at another gate. Solo. Confident. Backpack slung over one shoulder, boarding pass in hand. No obstacles. No extra steps. No second glances. Just movement. Just belonging. Voiceover continues. Because the goal was never special treatment. It was to move through the world without being questioned for simply existing in it. Final line. Power isn't defined by titles. It's defined by what we choose to stand for, especially when no one expects us to speak. Fade to black.